Greetings and welcome back to 303. We turn now in your hymnals to 1424, 1425, and the Maxine Kingston text, The Woman Warrior. Let's read a little bit about Maxine Kingston on page 1425, born in 1940. Right away a quote, "I was born to be a writer," Maxine Kingston once told an interviewer. "In the midst of any adventure, a born writer has a desire to hurry home and put it into words," she finished by quoting. Let's begin with first heading, Crossing Cultures. Although Kingston was born in America, she did not begin describing her adventures in English until she was nearly 10, because the language her family spoke at home was Seiyu, a Chinese dialect spoken around Canton, China. Kingston's parents came from a village near Kaohsiung. Her family left first for the Golden Mountain of America and settled in New York City. His training as a poet and calligrapher was unremarkable in the United States, her father's. So he earned a living working in the laundry business. Kingston's mother, who was trained as a midwife, used the money her husband sent home to run a clinic in their native village. She did so until 1939, when she escaped war-torn China and joined her husband. Not long afterward, the couple resettled in Stockton, California, where Maxine was born. Next heading, Building a Love for Story. Young Maxine, whose Chinese name is Ting Ting, was a shy and quiet girl who repeated kindergarten because she spoke very little English. While at home, however, she listened intently to the stories told by family members and friends. This love of storytelling later influenced her writing style as Kingston developed her own talk stories, as she called it. By the time she was 9 years old, she had mastered English and begun writing poetry. Soon she began to earn straight A's in school. Finally, a bestseller. Kingston shot to success with her first and best-known book, The Woman Warrior, Memories of a Childhood Among Ghosts. The subtitle refers to the pale ghosts of white America, as well as the ghosts of the narrator's ancestors in China. The Woman Warrior, a unique blend of folklore, myth, feminism, and autobiography, won a National Books Critics Circle Award in 1976. Kingston earned a National Books Critics Circle Award a second time in 1980 for Chinamen, which chronicles the lives of 3 generations of Chinese men in America. A methodical writer, Kingston labors over numerous revisions of her books. Her latest book is Veterans of War, Veterans of Peace 2006, which transforms the horrors experienced by veterans of World War II, Vietnam, and Iraq into words and stories from which they can draw strength. Let's begin at 2B, and let's talk really quickly with your literary analysis information. Write this word down under 2B. Memoirs. Write that word down, and let's define it really quickly. Memoirs are non-fiction narratives that recount events in which the writer was a participant or eyewitness. So in other words, they're kind of like reflective essays. Memoirs are by definition acts of memory shaped by literary skill. Often the memorist sets personal reflections against historical or cultural landscapes. For example, these lines from Kingston's memoir weave the personal and the historical. These new immigrants had it easy. On Ellis Island, the people were thin after 40 days at sea. Both Kingston and Mambe, we'll be working with Mambe here in a little bit, the names, skillfully incorporate details of culture, place, and history into their recollections of events from their lives. Comparing literary works. These selections, the one by Kingston and then the one by Mambe, noteworthy in many ways. As you read, consider how the two works are similar and different. For example, the two writers use language very differently. In addition, Momabe relates his experiences from the first-person point of view. Kingston, however, uses the limited third-person point of view, referring to both herself and her own mother, Brave Orchid, as she. As you read these memoirs, examine how the author's use of language and choices of point of view help to shape the meaning and power of their work. The reading strategy is to relate to these kinds of readings and your own experiences, what we call level 3, right? Also, pay attention to the vocabulary words at the bottom of 1424. Let's turn now to page 1426 and background information. Read it with me really quickly on 1426. The Woman Warrior is an innovative memoir that attempts to capture the experience of growing up in a bicultural world, part Chinese, part American. To accomplish her purpose, Kingston mingles the narrative with talk stories, tales full of magical events that she heard as a girl from her mother, Brave Orchid. The subtitle of the book, Memoir of a Girlhood Among Ghosts, refers both to white America, whose pale inhabitants remind Brave Orchid of ghosts, and to the family's ancestors in China. In this excerpt, we're just reading a part from this book. In this excerpt, Brave Orchid reunites with her sister, one of the ghosts of her past. Okay, let's go to work now, 1427, and let's just enjoy now the reading of this text, The Woman Warrior.
From The Woman Warrior by Maxine Kingston. When she was about 68 years old, Brave Orchid took a day off to wait at San Francisco International Airport for the plane that was bringing her sister to the United States. She had not seen Moon Orchid for 30 years. She had begun this waiting at home, getting up a half hour before Moon Orchid's plane took off in Hong Kong. Brave Orchid would add her willpower to the forces that keep an airplane up. Her head hurt with the concentration. The plane had to be light, so no matter how tired she felt, she dared not rest her spirit on a wing, but continuously and gently pushed up on the plane's belly. She had already been waiting at the airport for 9 hours. She was wakeful. Next to Brave Orchid sat Moon Orchid's only daughter, who was helping her aunt wait. Brave Orchid had made 2 of her own children come too, because they could drive, but they had been lured away by the magazine racks and the gift shops and coffee shops. Her American children could not sit for very long. They did not understand sitting. They had wandering feet. She hoped they would get back from the pay TVs or the pay toilets or wherever they were spending their money before the plane arrived. If they did not come back soon, she would go look for them. If her son thought he could hide in the men's room, he was wrong. "Are you all right, Aunt?" asked her niece. "No, this chair hurts me. Help me pull some chairs together so I can put my feet up." She unbundled a blanket and spread it out to make a bed for herself. On the floor she had 2 shopping bags full of canned peaches, real peaches, beans wrapped in taro leaves, cookies, thermos bottles, enough food for everybody, though only her niece would eat with her. Her bad boy and bad girl were probably sneaking hamburgers, wasting their money. She would scold them. Many soldiers and sailors sat about, oddly calm, like little boys in cowboy uniforms. She thought cowboy was what you would call a Boy Scout. They should have been crying hysterically on their way to Vietnam. If I see one that looks Chinese, she thought, I'll go over and give him some advice. She sat up suddenly. She had forgotten about her own son, who was even now in Vietnam. Carefully, she split her attention, beaming half of it to the ocean, into the water to keep him afloat. He was on a ship. He was in Vietnamese waters. She was sure of it. He and the other children were lying to her. They had said he was in Japan, and then they said he was in the Philippines. But when she sent him her help, she could feel that he was on a ship in Da Nang. Also, she had seen the children hide the envelopes that his letters came in. "Do you think my son is in Vietnam?" she asked her niece, who was dutifully eating. "No. Didn't your children say he was in the Philippines? Have you ever seen any of his letters with Philippine stamps on them?" "Oh, yes. Your children showed me one." "I wouldn't put it past them to send the letters to some Filipino they know. He puts Manila postmarks on them to fool me." "Yes, I can imagine them doing that. But don't worry, your son can take care of himself. All your children can take care of themselves." "Not him. He's not like other people. Not normal at all. He sticks erasers in his ears, and the erasers are still attached to the pencil stubs. The captain will say, 'Abandon ship,' or 'Watch out for bombs,' and he won't hear. He doesn't listen to orders. I told him to flee to Canada, but he wouldn't go." She closed her eyes. After a short while, plane and ship under control, she looked again at the children in uniforms. Some of the blonde ones looked like baby chicks, their crew cuts like the downy yellow on baby chicks. You had to feel sorry for them, even though they were Army and Navy ghosts. Suddenly, her son and daughter came running. "Come, Mother, the plane's landed early. She's here already." They hurried, folding up their mother's encampment. She was glad her children were not useless. They must have known what this trip to San Francisco was about then. "It's a good thing I made you come early," she said. Brave Orchid pushed to the front of the crowd. She had to be in front. The passengers were separated from the people waiting for them by glass doors and walls. Immigration ghosts were stamping papers. The travelers crowded along some conveyor belts to have their luggage searched. Brave Orchid did not see her sister anywhere. She stood watching for 4 hours. Her children left and came back. "Why don't you sit down?" they asked. "The chairs are too far away," she said. "Why don't you sit on the floor then?" No, she would stand, as her sister was probably standing in a line she could not see from here. Her American children had no feelings and no memory. To while away time, she and her niece talked about the Chinese passengers. These new immigrants had it easy. On Ellis Island, the people were thin after 40 days at sea and had no fancy luggage. "That one looks like her," Brave Orchid would say. "No, that's not her." Ellis Island had been made out of wood and iron. Here, everything was new plastic, a ghost trick to lure immigrants into feeling safe and spilling their secrets. Then the alien office could send them right back. Otherwise, why did they lock her out, not letting her help her sister answer questions and spell her name? At Ellis Island, when the ghost asked Brave Orchid what year her husband had cut off his pigtail, a Chinese who was crouching on the floor motioned her not to talk. "I don't know," she had said. If it weren't for that Chinese man, she might not be here today, or her husband either. She hoped some Chinese, a janitor or a clerk, would look out for Moon Orchid. Luggage conveyors fooled immigrants into thinking the Gold Mountain was going to be easy. Brave Orchid felt her heart jump. "Moon Orchid! There she is!" she shouted. But her niece saw it was not her mother at all, and it shocked her to discover the woman her aunt was pointing out. This was a young woman, younger than herself, no older than Moon Orchid the day the sisters parted. "Moon Orchid will have changed a little, of course," Brave Orchid was saying. "She will have learned to wear Western clothes." The woman wore a navy blue suit with a bunch of dark cherries at the shoulder. "No, Aunt," said the niece. "That's not my mother." "Perhaps not. It's been so many years." "Yes, it is your mother. It must be. Let her come closer and we can tell. Do you think she's too far away for me to tell, or is it my eyes getting bad?" "It's too many years gone by," said the niece. Brave Orchid turned suddenly. Another Moon Orchid. This one a neat little woman with a bun. She was laughing at something the person ahead of her in line said. Moon Orchid was like that, laughing at nothing. "I would be able to tell the difference if one of them would only come closer," Brave Orchid said with tears, which she did not wipe. 2 children met the woman with the cherries, and she shook their hands. The other woman was met by a young man. They looked at each other gladly, then walked away side by side. Up close, neither one of those women looked like Moon Orchid at all. "Don't worry, Aunt," said the niece. "I'll know her." "I'll know her too. I knew her before you did." The niece said nothing, although she had seen her mother only 5 years ago. Her aunt liked having the last word. Finally, Brave Orchid's children quit wandering and drooped on a railing. Who knew what they were thinking? At last, the niece called out, "I see her! I see her! Mother! Mother!" Whenever the doors parted, she shouted, probably embarrassing the American cousins, but she didn't care. She called out, "Mama! Mama!" until the crack in the sliding doors became too small to let in her voice. "Mama!" What heard a strange word in an adult voice. Many people turned to see what adult was calling Mama like a child. Brave Orchid saw an old woman jerk her head up, her little eyes blinking confusedly. A woman whose nerves leapt toward the sound any time she heard Mama. Then she relaxed to her own business again. She was a tiny lady, very thin, with little fluttering hands, and her hair was in a gray knot. She was dressed in a gray wool suit. She wore pearls around her neck and in her earlobes. Moon Orchid would travel with her jewels showing. Brave Orchid momentarily saw, like a larger, younger outline around this old woman, the sister she had been waiting for. The familiar dim halo faded, leaving the woman so old, so gray, so old. Brave Orchid pressed against the glass. That old lady? Yes, that old lady facing the ghost who stamped her papers without questioning her was her sister. Then, without noticing her family, Moon Orchid walked smiling over to the suitcase inspector ghost, who took her boxes apart, pulling out puffs of tissue. From where she was, Brave Orchid could not see what her sister had chosen to carry across the ocean. She wished her sister would look her way. Brave Orchid thought that if she were entering a new country, she would be at the windows. Instead, Moon Orchid hovered over the unwrapping, surprised at each reappearance, as if she were opening presents after a birthday party. Mama, Moon Orchid's daughter kept calling. Brave Orchid said to her children, "Why don't you call your aunt too? Maybe she'll hear us if all of you call out together." But her children slunk away. Maybe that shame face they so often wore was American politeness. Mama! Moon Orchid's daughter called again, and this time her mother looked right at her. She left her bundles in a heap and came running. "Hey!" the customs ghost yelled at her. She went back to clear up her mess, talking inaudibly to her daughter all the while. Her daughter pointed toward Brave Orchid, and at last Moon Orchid looked at her. Two old women with faces like mirrors. Their hands reached out as if to touch the other's face, then returned to their own, the fingers checking the grooves in the forehead and along the sides of the mouth. Moon Orchid, who never understood the gravity of things, started smiling and laughing, pointing at Brave Orchid. Finally, Moon Orchid gathered up her stuff, strings hanging and papers loose, and met her sister at the door, where they shook hands, oblivious to blocking the way. "You're an old woman," said Brave Orchid. "Ay-ya! You're an old woman. But you are really old. Surely you can't say that about me. I'm not old the way you're old." "But you really are old. You're 1 year older than I am. Your hair is white, and your face all wrinkled. You're so skinny. You're so fat. Fat women are more beautiful than skinny women." The children pulled them out of the doorway. One of Brave Orchid's children brought the car from the parking lot, and the other heaved the luggage into the trunk. They put the two old ladies and the niece in the back seat. All the way home, across the Bay Bridge, over the Diablo Hills, across the San Joaquin River to the valley moon so white at dusk, all the way home, the two sisters exclaimed every time they turned to look at each other, "Ay-ya! How old!" Brave Orchid forgot that she got sick in cars, that all vehicles but palanquins made her dizzy. "You're so old," she kept saying. "How did you get so old?" Brave Orchid had tears in her eyes, but Moon Orchid said, "You look older than I. You are older than I." And again she'd laugh. "You're wearing an old mask to tease me." It surprised Brave Orchid that after 30 years she could still get annoyed at her sister's silliness.
All right, let's pause now for a moment and just do a quick annotation of this reading, beginning at level 1. What is for you the most interesting summary that you can jot down about what it is that we're looking at here? Some students will report, this is a really interesting kind of cross-cultural study where you have two sisters who have been away from each other for 30 years. One sister, the younger, ironically, waiting at the San Francisco airport for the other sister to arrive. Notice the differences between the two names, Moon Orchid and Brave Orchid. And what do you find interesting about those two names as kind of maybe describing the two different kinds of personality types? Of course, Brave Orchid, the one waiting at the airport, has children of her own there that she is responsible for. And of course, she has a niece there who's kind of maybe the conduit or the translator between the two cultures, China and America, trying to maybe make some contact between the two. Finally, they meet. And when they meet, the one observation that keeps being made over and over again is, you've grown so old. For 30 years, you've not seen each other. And then the observation is, how did you get so old? And the other one will say, how did you get so old? You notice the interesting cultural difference as well that's listed or provided for you in 1432. Moon Orchid, who spent the last 30 years in China, will say, fat women are more beautiful than skinny women. And of course, we have a cultural maybe difference here going on. In America, there's always this emphasis on being thin. And in China, it's maybe not so critical, right? So you have this difference in cultural understandings. And then finally, at the very end, they're together in the car, driving across the San Francisco Bay Bridge and then home. So that's a level 1 read. Let's now turn and maybe ask some questions at level 2A about themes or messages in a reading like this. Let's list several for our notes, shall we? One obvious one is that in many ways we are